We are going through a very nice book by Andrees and Janssen on Elinor Ostrom's work about sustaining the commons. We just defined some simple things. In chapter 2, we are going to go into more the analysis part of how Elinor Ostrom thought about commons and why she concluded that human beings are not just rational beings who are always maximizing self-interest and so on. So she imagines that all interactions human beings have are typically happening in a institutional framework, and the institution may be explicit or implicit. For example, when you're sitting in a classroom, there is a teacher, you may be student, you know there is a syllabus, you know there is evaluation, there are rules by the department, university, and so on. So there are actors in action theaters, and you follow rules, sometimes explicit rules, sometimes implicit, sometimes informal, and so on. And there are many examples of how people in Nepal have their cows taken away and put in a prison in town center if they don't pay for their use of the irrigation system. That puts them to shame, and that prevents them from milking the cow. So then they pay the penalty and release their cow from the cow jail, and so on. So whether you are buying something like a vegetable in a market, or you are in a classroom, or you are buying ticket for a concert, there are always implicit and explicit norms or rules, and there are punishments if you don't follow the rule. And we'll see that there is always the idea of free riders. So every time you have certain size of population sharing things, especially we are going to keep focusing on the commons, there are people who are going to cheat or try to avoid following the rules or paying their fair share of the costs involved, and so on. So once she defines an institution as a framework within which structured and repetitive interactions happen in life, then there is a way to define the institution formally and look at the institutional analysis and development, or IAD, which is the framework she developed to understand how people behave in the context of the commons, and what are the levers and so on that you can use to sustain the commons. And we'll see by the end of the course that she's very happy to admit that global change, climate change, global warming, etc., are at a scale that don't necessarily fit neatly into her framework of IAD because they are too huge in scale. So her framework works for smaller scale commons. Maybe we can sustain smaller scale commons.